Does Games Workshop need to embrace 3D printing and join the dark side and get some 3D prints out there? Let's discuss that. So something I hear a lot whenever I go on to different forums, if you go onto different Facebook pages, is that if Games Workshop want to survive, they have to become a 3D printing company and start putting their sculpts out there for 3D printers. And I guess the question is, will Games Workshop die? Like a lot of people keep saying, they'll eventually die if they don't do this, and do they actually just need to do it? And in my opinion, the short answer to both of those questions is no, they don't need to do that, and they're not going to die if they don't embrace it. But I just wanted to discuss my thoughts around it, because I do get asked it, actually more than I'd expect. So first up, let's talk about the reasons why I don't think that Games Workshop necessarily should, or why they probably don't want to. And the first one is they've got pretty strict quality control, from what I can see anyway. They like to get their models out there. They've got to be the same sort of way. They've got all sorts of different rule sets. And by allowing 3D printers onto the scene, it really starts to mix up what's going on their tabletops in their stores. And ultimately, that's where they've got the rules. They're allowed to do, I guess, whatever they want there. Although I would love it if I could print off a whole army and take it to my local Games Workshop store and join in with some of their games. I do understand the reasons they don't want to. When I first got into this hobby, my printing was pretty abysmal. It took me ages to kind of figure it all out and just get through all of those hurdles. So there are some really bad prints out there. And it also opens up all sorts of other issues like piracy and where people are getting those models from. But perhaps the bigger thing is that realistically, if you just look at how Games Workshop are doing at the moment, they don't necessarily need to do something else to get that stream of revenue. And it might hurt their business model as it stands at the moment. They're already massively successful on their own thing, doing it their own way and having all their different releases and reprints and stuff like that. So embracing the 3D printing side of things probably isn't really on their agenda or something that they need to do. And certainly the 3D printing community growing as it is at the moment, although it's probably taking quite a few people away from them, it's not hurting them in the way that you'd maybe expect. I'm a prime example of that. Now what I mean by that is things like this. I am mostly a 3D printing channel and I do lots and lots of 3D printing, but I do still tinker with all my Games Workshop products. Every so often something will really take my fancy that I'll end up picking up and buying or adding to my arsenal. And this is kind of on the flip side of it, where although I don't think Games Workshop need to embrace 3D printing and join that 3D printing community by putting out their sculpts and everything else, I do wish that they would stop being so intolerant. I don't know if that's a word, but they're very much against, you can't use anything to kit bash your models and nothing at all within your armies can be 3D printed. And in my opinion, they should kind of relax that, because obviously once you start to get into that tabletop hobby, Games Workshop is a big brand, but they can be quite alienating in that respect. But me doing this means I buy their paints, I will buy certain models from them, I'll buy different sets from them, I like to get into the lore and everything else. So it'd just be nice if they were a little bit more welcoming, just to the general hobbyists out there, just make it a little bit nicer. So like I said, their business model doesn't really show that they need to get into 3D printing at the moment. Another reason is that although 3D printers are becoming more consumer friendly, they certainly don't feel like consumer level products at the moment. They've got a lot of tinkering. The resin is ultimately something that could really be detrimental to your health if you use it wrong. You've got things like the alcohol to clean it all up. And can you imagine a big company like Games Workshop putting out a 3D printer along with the resin and everything else, and somebody walking into the shop to buy their kids a 3D printer because it's marketed as this really safe and easy thing to use, and suddenly something goes wrong? It feels like a lawsuit waiting to happen with something like that. Until resin 3D printing becomes a little bit more consumer safe, I can't see any of the big name companies moving into something that they would put their brand on and their reputation and just open themselves up for. Now let's talk about whether or not they should get into the 3D printing community. From my perspective as a 3D printer, the answer is absolutely categorically no. I don't want Games Workshop anywhere near the 3D printing community. And the reason why is it would probably look something like this. They would introduce the new resin printer, the 40K printer, small print, only 4K. And it would be locked down to their software. And Games Workshop software would be cloud-based as well, so you'd need to pay a subscription for it. And how this would work is you would get your prints, but you'd only have access to the STL files in the cloud for 48 hours, where you could then print them. But you would then need some kind of cloud software that links up with your printer. Nothing would be physically saved to USBs. And it would all be in the way of innovation. We at Games Workshop have introduced a new mobile phone application where you can print your prints from. and you never need to do anything with a computer. You don't need powerful hardware to run it. But in reality, that's basically saying we're locking those files away so you only have them for a limited time, you've only got a limited time to print them off, and everything's going to be locked behind Games Workshop's monetization. That to me sounds like an absolute awful thing. Now, I'm not saying that that's exactly how it would go, but if they moved into this space, they would absolutely not want to be putting their files out there for people to just be able to print off as many Space Marines as they possibly wanted, because that would start to eat into their revenue. They would look at different ways they could monetize it, and that sort of thing, and I really hope, and I guess no one from Games Workshop watches my video, so we don't have to worry, but that sort of thing would sit so nicely with the way they could monetize 3D printing and stop people from just being able to constantly churn out Space Marine after Space Marine after Space Marine and never buy anything else from them. Also, you just need to look at how many models and sculpts are coming from Games Workshop at the moment. They just seem to be on this treadmill of constant content, and that's great for people buying all of their models. But can you imagine how much more content would be coming from? They'd probably become like never ending. And yeah, my wallet can't handle that sort of thing. Also, there are so many incredible 3D print communities out there, and creators and sculptors and other companies that we can currently use. I really enjoy the fact that I've explored and found so many different Patreons and sculptors and different people and different companies that I can get their prints from and print them out. If Games Workshop had been on the scene right from the word go when I got into 3D printing, I don't know if that would have happened. I don't know if I'd have just gravitated towards the big name brand and stuck with them. And that would be really disappointing in hindsight, because there's so many crazy, incredible creators out there. Games Workshop moving in, it just means that people getting into 3D printing will probably then start to use just Games Workshop files, and we will just see Warhammer take over the 3D printing world. And that's not a 3D printing future that I'd like to see right now. So yeah, a bit of a random video there, just with my take on whether or not Games Workshop needs to be in the 3D printing space, and whether or not they should be in the 3D printing space. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts in the comments below as well, so throw them down there, keep them civil as well. Remember, people will have different thoughts on this. A lot of people would love it if Games Workshop moved into the 3D printing space. Hell, I would really like to see their take on 3D print and what they could do with that and what direction they'd go. I'm just really scared that if they moved into that space, it would become something like I said there with the Warhammer 40k 3D printer, cloud-based only, lockdown only. So yeah, it's a really interesting dilemma. But I guess it could be interesting. It could also be a hell of a nightmare. So let me know in the comments below your thoughts on that. Also as well, hit the subscribe button, come along for some more 3D printing content. If you really want to have a chat as well, pop on over to my Discord channel where we talk all things hobby, 3D printing and painting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.